After Marcus kicked me out of the house, I landed a job as a cook at a small diner downtown. Every day, walking out of work, I'd see the same elderly woman sitting on the corner begging. She was older than me, her face lined by the sun, her hands trembling. Something in her eyes reminded me of my own mother. I started stopping in front of her. I'd drop a few coins in her rusted can, sometimes give her a leftover roll from the kitchen. We never talked much, just a nod, a tired smile, and then I'd keep going toward the rooming house where I was now living alone. Welcome to Betty's Stories. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and like my video. Now let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. I was 69 years old when my son told me there was no longer a place for me in his house. He didn't raise his voice. There was no scene. He just looked at me from across the table and said it was time for me to find my own space, that he had his life, his plans, and that I needed to understand. Understand what? I wouldn't know until much later. I remember packing my things into an old duffel bag. Clothes, a few documents, a picture of Marcus when he was small. Nothing else. I didn't have much. Either. Spent my entire life taking care of that house, that son, that family that was now shutting the door on me with a cold courtesy that hurt worse than any insult. I didn't cry in front of him. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I walked out with my head high, even though inside I felt something shatter. It was like walking barefoot on glass, but refusing to let anyone see the pain. The rooming house, where I found a room, was small and dim. The walls had damp stains and the mattress creaked every time I moved, but it was what I could afford with what little retirement money I had left. Marcus hadn't given me a dime. He didn't even offer to help with the first month's rent. I spent the first few nights awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering when everything had gone wrong. I'd been a good mother. I'd given him everything. I'd worked until my body couldn't take any more. I'd given up my dreams, my desires, so he could have what I never did. And now I was here alone, old, invisible. But I couldn't just sit still. I couldn't afford the luxury of sinking into sadness. I needed money. I needed to eat. So I went out looking for work. I knocked on many doors. At some, they wouldn't even let me finish talking. "We don't hire people your age anymore," they'd say with an awkward smile. At others, they'd look me up and down and shake their heads before I even gave my name until I got to Mr. Johnson's place. It was a modest local diner with wooden tables and checkered tablecloths. It smelled of fried onions and fresh coffee. Mr. Johnson was a man in his 50s with gray hair and big calloused hands. He looked at me in silence when I told him I was looking for a job. "Can you cook?" he asked. "I've cooked all my life," I replied. He nodded. "Start tomorrow, 6 o'clock in the morning. Don't be late." There was no contract, no paperwork, just a handshake and the promise of a weekly paycheck. It wasn't much, but it was enough to pay for the room and buy some food. That night I slept a little better. I had a purpose. I had something to do. The work at the diner was hard. I spent hours standing, peeling potatoes, chopping vegetables, stirring huge pots. My hands filled with small burns. My feet swelled at the end of the day, but I didn't complain. I couldn't afford to. The other employees were young. They looked at me with curiosity at first, then with indifference. I didn't talk much. I just did my job and left. I wasn't looking for friends. I wasn't looking for pity. It was one of those afternoons leaving the diner that I first saw her. She was sitting on the corner near the bus stop. Her white hair was messy and unkempt, her clothes dirty and torn. In front of her was a rusted can with a few coins. I passed her by the first time, not because I didn't want to help, but because I barely had anything myself. But something made me turn back. Maybe it was her gaze. Maybe it was the memory of my own mother, who had also aged in. Silence, always waiting for someone to see her. The next day, I stopped in front of her. I took a few coins out of my pocket and dropped them into the can. She looked up and met my eyes, which were tired. She didn't say anything, just gave a slight nod. That became my routine. Every day after work, I'd stop in front of her. Sometimes I gave her money, other times a piece of bread I'd saved from the diner. We never spoke, just that silent exchange of humanity. Weeks passed, then months. My life was reduced to that work, walk, sleep. I hadn't heard from Marcus. I wasn't looking for him. I didn't want to know about him. But something was bothering me. Lately, when I walked past the rooming house, I felt like someone was watching me. Once I saw a shadow move behind a window. Another time, climbing the stairs, I heard quick footsteps retreating. I dismissed it. I thought it was my imagination, that the loneliness was playing tricks on me. Until one afternoon, as I bent down to hand the woman on the corner some change, she grabbed my hand firmly. Her fingers were cold and bony, but her grip was strong. She looked me straight in the eyes and said in a voice, "You've been good to me all these months. Let me return the favor. Don't go back to your rooming house today. Find a cheap motel. Stay there tonight. Tomorrow morning, I'll tell you something that will change your life." I froze. Her look was serious. Urgent. There was no madness in her eyes, just certainty. Why? I managed to ask. She shook her head. "Trust me, please." I slowly let go of her hand and walked away, confused. What did she mean? Why shouldn't I go back to my rooming house? What did she know that I didn't? I walked aimlessly for a while, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to ignore her words. I thought maybe she was senile, that she'd confused things. But another part of me, the part that had felt those strange stares, those footsteps in the dark, told me to listen. I decided to take her advice. I found a cheap motel near downtown. I paid with the little I had saved and went up to a tiny room with a hard bed and a window that faced an alley. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my hands. They were wrinkled, stained, tired. My whole life I'd worked with these hands. I'd cooked, cleaned, cared for others. And now I was here in a strange motel, following the advice of a woman who lived on the street. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for morning to find out what that woman had to tell me. The dawn came slowly, filtering through the dirty motel window. I hadn't slept. Every noise in the hallway startled me. Every passing car made me think of the absurdity of my situation. I was in a cheap motel, following a stranger's advice, while my room at the rooming house remained empty. I got up with an aching body, washed my face with cold water, and left without eating breakfast. I wasn't hungry. I only had questions. The woman, Ruth, was still on her corner as always, as if she hadn't moved all night. But when she saw me arrive, her eyes lit up with something like relief. "You did well not to go back," she said before I could speak. I knelt in front of her, not caring that people were walking past us, looking on curiously. "What's going on? What do you know?" She looked around, making sure no one was listening. Then she leaned toward me and spoke in a low voice. "I saw a man prowling around your rooming house 2 days ago. Then, yesterday afternoon, he was staring up at your window, waiting for something." My heart skipped a beat. "What man?" "Tall, dark hair, dressed nice, not like the folks around here. He had a black bag in his hand." She paused. "He looked like you, around the eyes, the shape of the mouth." I gasped for breath. "Marcus, are you sure?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. She nodded. "I live here on this corner. Nobody sees me, but I see everything. That man wasn't coming to visit you. He was coming to do something, and it wasn't good." My hands were shaking. I wanted to say she was wrong, that Marcus would never do such a thing. But the words wouldn't come out because deep down a part of me already knew. I had felt his coldness. I had seen his indifference. And now this. Thank you, I managed to say. Thank you for warning me. She touched my arm. Gently. You fed me when no one else would. It was the least I could do. I walked away from her, stunned. My legs barely held me up. I walked aimlessly. For a while, trying to process what I had just heard. Marcus had been at the rooming house looking for me, waiting for me. Why? I walked past the diner, but I didn't go in. I couldn't work in this state. Mr. Johnson would see my face and know something was wrong. I needed to think. I needed to understand. I went to a nearby city park and sat on a bench. Pigeons pecked at the ground and children played in the distance. Everything seemed so normal, so detached from what I was feeling. I thought about Marcus, about the child he had been. I remembered when he was 5 years old and got a high fever. I spent 3 nights awake taking care of him, putting cold rags on his forehead, praying for his recovery. I remembered his first communion, his graduation, the day he told me he was getting married. When had that child turned into this? I took my old phone out of my pocket. I had a few unread messages. One was from the rooming house landlady. I opened it with trembling hands. Evelyn, I need to talk to you urgently. Call me. I dialed her number, my heart racing. She answered on the second ring. Evelyn, thank God. Where are you? Her voice sounded frantic. In a park. What's wrong? There was a silence, then a sigh. There was a problem at the rooming house. Last night. In your room? My blood ran cold. What kind of problem? There was a gas leak in your room. Specifically, if you had been there. She didn't finish the sentence. The world stopped. A gas leak in my room, the very night Ruth had told me not to go back. How did it happen? I asked in a voice I barely recognized as my own. I don't know. The technician came this morning. He said the water heater valve was opened. But I don't understand. You were always so careful with those things. I didn't open that valve, I said. I haven't used the heater in weeks. Another silence. Then someone else did. I hung up. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Someone had entered my room, opened the gas valve, tried to kill me, and that someone was Marcus. I went back to the corner where Ruth was. She looked at me, sadly, as if she already knew what I had just discovered. I'm sorry, she said. I simply sat on the ground next to her, not caring about the dirt. My son tried to kill me. The words sounded unreal even as I said them, but they were true as the sun beating down on our skin at that moment. I've seen them before, she said softly. Children who get tired of waiting, who want what their parents have. It's more common than you think. But I don't have anything, I said bitterly. Just a small property my husband left me. A plot of land that's only worth a few thousand. For so little. She looked at me with wise eyes. For some, any amount is enough, especially if they have debts, if they have vices, if they have needs they can't control. I remembered the calls then, the ones Marcus received that made him nervous, the quiet conversations, the times I asked to borrow something and he refused, saying he was tight on money. I always thought it was normal that everyone goes through bad patches, but now everything made sense. Marcus needed money, and I was the only thing standing between him and that plot of land my husband had left me. What do I do now, Ba? I asked, not to her specifically, but to the air, to the sky, to anyone who wanted to answer. You go to the police, she said firmly, and you tell them everything, because if you don't, he'll try again, and next time you might not have a crazy old woman to warn you. She was right. I knew it. But going to the police meant admitting my son wanted me dead. It meant putting into words what I could barely accept in my mind. I spent the rest of the day walking through the city. I didn't go to work. I didn't call Mr. Johnson to explain. I just walked, trying to find the courage to do what I had to do. As evening fell, I went back to the cheap motel. I paid for another night with the little I had left. I locked myself in the room and finally cried. I cried for the son I had lost, for the life I had built that was now crumbling, for myself, and for the naive of believing that a mother's love was enough to protect me from everything. When the tears ran out, I washed my face and looked in the mirror. My eyes were swollen. My pale skin looked older than it was. But there was something new in me, something hard, something that wasn't there before. Determination. I wasn't going to let Marcus win. I wasn't going to die in silence, so he could cash in on a piece of land he didn't even need. If he wanted to kill me, he'd have to face me first. The next morning, I found the nearest police precinct. It was an old building with peeling paint. I walked in with a firm step, though I was trembling inside. A young officer greeted me at the counter. "How can I help you, ma'am?" I took a deep breath. "I'm here to report attempted murder." He looked up, surprised. "Can you give me more details?" "My son tried to kill me," I said, and for the first time since I'd known it, my voice didn't shake when I said it. "They sat me in a small room." Another older officer with an immaculate uniform and a serious gaze came in. He introduced himself as Sergio O'Neill. "Tell me everything from the beginning," he said, opening a notebook. And I told him about being kicked out of my house, about the job at the diner, about the woman on the corner and her warning, about the gas leak, about Marcus prowling the rooming house. The sergeant took notes without interrupting. When I finished, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "Do you have proof of any of this?" he asked. "The landlady, can she confirm the gas incident? And the woman who warned you, does she have a name, an address?" I realized I didn't even know her name. "She lives on the street on the corner of Central Avenue." The sergeant closed his notebook. "Miss Hayes, I'm going to be honest with you. Without concrete proof, this is difficult to investigate. A gas leak could be an accident, and the testimony of someone with no fixed address doesn't carry much legal weight." I felt myself sinking. "So you're not going to do anything?" "I didn't say that. I'm going to open an investigation. I'm going to talk to the landlady. I'm going to check if there are cameras in the area. But I need you to be prepared for this to take time." I nodded, even though inside I felt like I was drowning. Time was exactly what I didn't have because Marcus was still out there, and now he'd know I was onto him. I left the precinct, my legs heavy. The sun beat down on the pavement, and people rushed past me, each one wrapped up in their own concerns. No one looked at me. No one knew I had just reported my own son for attempted murder. I couldn't go back to the rooming house. That was clear. But I couldn't keep paying for motel either. The money I had saved was running out fast. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I walked to the diner. Mr. Johnson was in the kitchen as always, apron stained, brow furrowed while checking a pot. When he saw me come in, his expression softened just a little. "Evelyn, you didn't come in yesterday or the day before." "I'm sorry," I said. I didn't know what else to say. He wiped his hands on his apron and looked me up and down. "Are you okay?" The simple question almost broke me. No one had asked me that in so long that I had forgotten what it felt like for someone to care. I nodded, though we both knew it was a lie. "I need to work," I said. "Please, I need the money." Mr. Johnson sighed. "All right, but if something happens, if you need help, you tell me. Got it?" I nodded again and put on my apron. The work helped me not to think. I peeled potatoes until my hands hurt. I chopped onions until the tears that fell could be confused with those caused by the sting. I washed dishes until the hot water re-ened my skin. At the end of the day, Mr. Johnson paid me for the whole week, even though I had missed 2 days. I didn't say anything. I just took the money and carefully put it in my pocket. When I left, I looked for Ruth on her corner. I needed to talk to someone. I needed someone to understand what I was going through. But she wasn't there that day. Her spot was empty. Only the overturned rusted can remained on the
ground.
A sudden fear washed over me. What if something had happened to her? What if Marcus had found out she had warned me? I walked through the nearby streets looking for her, asking other homeless people if they had seen her.
No.
One knew anything. No one remembered seeing her. I went back to the motel with a tight chest. I went up to my room and sat on the bed, staring at the phone. I had 3 missed calls, all 3 from a number I knew very well. Marcus hadn't left voice messages, just the insistent calls, as if he knew I was avoiding him. I lay down without dinner. The hunger was a dull ache in my stomach, but I didn't have the strength to go out for food. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but every noise startled me. Every step in the hallway made me hold my breath. Sometime in the pre-dawn hours, I finally fell into a restless sleep. I dreamed of Marcus as a child. He had a fever and was calling me from his bed. I ran toward him, but the room grew longer and longer. I could never reach him, and his voice became more and more desperate until it turned into a scream. I woke up sweating. The clock read 5 in the morning. It was still dark outside. I got up and washed my face. There was no point in trying to sleep anymore. I went down to the reception. The night clerk was dozing behind the counter. He didn't see me leave. The streets were empty. Only a few early workers walked toward their jobs.
I
Arrived at the corner where Ruth always was, expecting to find her there, but it was still empty. I sat on the ground in the very spot where she used to be and waited. I didn't know what else to do. The sky began to lighten slowly, painting itself in shades of gray and orange. The city was waking up around
me.
That's when I saw her. She was walking slowly down the street, dragging her feet with a plastic bag in her hand. When she saw me sitting in her spot, she stopped surprised. "What are you doing here so early?" she asked. I got up quickly. "I thought something had happened to you. You weren't here yesterday." She smiled tiredly. "There's a shelter that opens on Thursdays. They serve hot food." I went there. She held up the bag. They gave me clean clothes. I felt an immense relief. I went to the police.
I
Told them everything. Her expression turned serious. "And what did they say?" "That they're going to investigate, but that they need proof. That without proof they can't do much." She nodded slowly. "That's how it always works. The poor need proof. The rich just need words." We fell silent. I didn't know if Marcus was rich, but he definitely had more than me. He had connections. He had
a house.
He had a life I had helped build, and from which I was now completely excluded. "What are you going to do?"
She asked me.
"I don't know," I admitted.
I can't go
"Back to the rooming house. I can't keep paying for motel, and I don't have anywhere to go." She looked at me with those eyes that had seen too much. "There's a women's shelter on 7th Street. It's not pretty, but it's safe. You can stay there while you figure things out." The idea of going to a shelter churned my stomach. I had worked my whole life. I had a house, a family, a normal life. And now I was considering going to a shelter as if I were just another homeless person. But that was exactly what I was now. A woman without a home. A woman whose own son wanted her dead. "Thank you," I said. "I'll think about it." I went straight to the diner from
there.
Mr. Johnson was already prepping the day's ingredients. He saw me come in and didn't say anything, just pointed toward the aprons. I worked all morning in silence, grateful for the distraction. During my midday break, I went out for air. I sat in the alley behind the diner where empty vegetable crates were stacked. I took out my phone and stared at Marcus' missed calls. Part of me wanted to answer, wanted to confront him, ask him why, ask him how he had gotten to this point. But another part of me knew that would only put him on alert. If he suspected I knew something, he might act faster. He might be more careful. The phone rang in my hand. It was him again. This time, before I could think too much, I answered. "Mom." His voice sounded relieved. "You finally answered. I've been worried." The lie was so blatant almost made me laugh. Worried? Yes, I've been calling you. Where are you? Why aren't you at the rooming house?
So he
Already knew. He had probably gone looking for me, and the landlady had told him I hadn't slept there.
I'm
Staying with a friend.
elite.
I needed a change of scenery. There was a pause. What friend? I thought you didn't know anyone around here. I met people at work, I said, keeping my voice steady. Why all the interest, Marcus? I thought you didn't want anything to do with me anymore. That's not true, Mom. I just wanted you to have your space, but you're still my mother.
I worry about you.
The words were right, but the tone was empty. It was like listening to an actor, reading a badly written script.
I have to hang up, I said.
I'm working.
Wait, I need to talk to you about something.
About your father's land deed papers. There are some documents I need you to sign. It's to renew the property. Taxes. Can you come home this weekend? There it was. The real reason for his call, the papers, the land, the inheritance that was worth more than my life. I can't this weekend, I said.
I'm Buse.
It's important, Mom. If we don't renew the taxes, we could lose the property. Then lose it, I said before hanging up. My hands were shaking.
My
Heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. I had been more direct than I intended. Now he would know. Something was wrong. I went back inside. Mr. Johnson looked at me concerned, but
didn't ask anything.
I finished my shift on autopilot, my mind elsewhere.
When I
left, I looked up the address Ruth had given me. The shelter was in a gray two-story building. There was a line of women waiting outside, some with children, others alone, like me. I stood at the end of the line. A social worker with a clipboard was taking names. When my turn came, she looked at me with professional weariness. Name and age. Evelyn Hayes, 69.
She
wrote without looking up. Situation. Domestic violence. I hesitated. Did this count as domestic violence? My son kicked me out of the house. She looked up for the first time.
Something in my
face must have told her there was more to the story. You can come in. There's a bed available tonight. They gave me a clean sheet and showed me a large room with bunk beds. There were other women there, some young, others my age, all with the same lost look, all trying to understand how they had ended up there. I put my few belongings under the bed, assigned to me, and sat on the thin mattress. This was my life now.
A
shelter, a borrowed bed, no place to call home. But at least I was alive.
And
as long as I was alive, I could fight. I spent 5 nights at the shelter.
5
nights listening to babies cry, to the whispered conversations of women who couldn't sleep, to the creaking of the bunks every time someone moved. The place smelled of cheap detergent and accumulated desperation. During the day, I worked at the diner. Mr. Johnson had noticed my tiredness,
but he didn't ask.
I was grateful for his silence. I didn't have the strength to explain how a 69-year-old woman had ended up sleeping in a homeless shelter. On the 6th day, when I arrived at work, Mr. Johnson was waiting for me at the back door. He had a frown and his arms were crossed. I need to talk to you, he said. My heart jumped. He was going to fire me. I couldn't lose this
job.
It was the only stable thing I had. Come with me, he said, and led me to his small office at the back of the diner. It was a narrow room with an old desk and walls covered in tacked up receipts. He sat down and gestured to the other chair. Sit down. I obeyed, my hands clasped in my lap. A woman came in yesterday asking for you, he
said.
Young, well-dressed. Said she was your daughter-in-law. My blood froze. What did she want? She asked where you
lived.
Said your son was worried because you weren't answering the phone. That they wanted to make sure you were okay. What did you tell her? That I didn't know. That you just come to work and leave. He looked me straight in the
eyes.
Evelyn, are you in trouble? The words caught in my throat. I wanted to say no, that everything was fine, but my face betrayed me. Mr. Johnson sighed.
I
Don't know what's going on, and I'm not going to force you to tell me, but that woman didn't look worried. She looked like she was hunting. He was right. Marcus was looking for me, and now he was using his wife to track me down. Thank you for not telling her anything, I managed to say.
Be
Careful, Mr. Johnson said. And if you need anything, even if it's just someone, to know where you are in case something happens, you tell me. I nodded and left the office, my legs trembling. I worked the rest of the day constantly watching the door, expecting to see Marcus's wife appear at any moment. That afternoon, when I left the diner, I went straight to the corner where Ruth always was.
I
Needed to talk to someone. I needed to vent before I exploded. She was there sitting in her usual spot with the can in front of her. When she saw me arrive, my face distraught, she made space for me beside her. Tell me, she said. Simply. I told her about Marcus's call, about his wife's visit to the diner, about how trapped I felt, not knowing what to do. She listened in silence, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she was thoughtful. You know what surprises me the most about all this? She finally said. That he thinks you're stupid. He thinks you won't notice, that you can be easily manipulated. She was
right.
Marcus had always treated me that way, as if I were naive, as if I didn't understand how the world worked. Use that to your advantage, she continued. Let him think he's in control. In the meantime, you prepare your defense.
What?
Defense? I have nothing, not even proof of what he did. She looked at me with that wisdom that only comes from living on the street. The proof is out there. You just have to know where to look. Your landlady can testify about the gas. The technician who checked the installation has a report. And I saw your son that night. The officer said, your testimony doesn't count for much because you don't have a fixed address. I said bitterly. Then we have to give me one, she said with a sad smile, or get something else that makes me credible. I didn't understand what she meant until 2 days later. It was Friday morning.
I
Arrived at the diner early as always. But when I walked in the back door, I found Mr. Johnson talking to a man in a uniform. It wasn't a regular police officer. It was Sergeant O'Neill. My first instinct was to run, but Mr. Johnson saw me and motioned for me to approach. Ms. Hayes, the sergeant said, I need to talk to you.
panic.
Tighten my chest. Did something happen? Yes, and
No.
can we speak privately? Mr. Johnson lent us his office. The sergeant closed the door and pulled out a manila folder. I've been investigating your case, he said, and I found some interesting things. He opened the folder and showed me some papers. They were bank statements. It took me a moment to realize they were Marcus. How did you get these? I asked. I have my methods, he said vaguely. Look here. Your son has considerable debts. Unpaid. Loans, credit cards maxed out, and 3 months ago, he took out a loan using the land your husband left you as collateral. I couldn't breathe. He can do that. The land is in my name. Not if. He forged your signature. And that's exactly what I believe happened. He showed me another paper. This is the deed he presented to the bank. This is his signature. I looked at the document. The signature resembled mine, but it wasn't exact. The strokes were different, firmer, more confident.
No.
Said, that is not my signature. The sergeant nodded, satisfied. That's what I thought. This changes everything. We're no longer talking about just attempted murder. We're talking about fraud, document forgery, and possibly more. What does that mean?
It means we
Have a solid reason to arrest him. Attempted murder is hard to prove without credible witnesses, but bank fraud is clearer. Banks don't take these things lightly. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. They're going to arrest him. I need you to come to the precinct and make a formal statement about the forgery. I also need you to bring any documents you have about the land, original deeds, papers, anything that proves you are the sole owner. There. At the rooming house, I said, in a box under my bed. Can I go get them?
The
Idea of going back to the rooming house terrified me, but I needed those papers. They were the only proof that the land was mine. I'll go with you, the sergeant said as if reading my mind. You won't be alone. We went that same afternoon. The sergeant drove an unmarked patrol car.
I
Sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, my hands clasped in my lap. When we arrived at the rooming house, the landlady was at the front desk. She was surprised to see me with a police officer. Evelyn, what's going on? I need to pick up some things from my room, I
said.
She gave me the key without asking questions. We went up to the second
Floor.
My room was at the end of the hall. The door was still locked just as I had left it. I opened it with trembling hands. The room was exactly as I remembered it. The bed unmade, the curtains drawn, the smell of stale air. I knelt by the bed and pulled out the shoebox I kept underneath. Inside were all my important documents, my birth certificate, marriage certificate, my husband's death certificate, and the land deed. I carefully pulled out the deed and handed it to the sergeant. He quickly examined it.
Perfect, he said.
This is enough. That's when I heard it. Footsteps in the hall, voices. One of them I recognized. Immediately. Marcus. The sergeant heard it too. He put a hand on my shoulder. Stay here, he whispered.
He stepped
out into the hall. I stood paralyzed next to the bed, my heart pounding so hard I thought whoever was outside could hear it. I heard the sergeant's voice. Can I help you? Who are you? Marcus replied. What are you doing in my mother's room?
I'm Sergeant O'Neill.
And you are? Marcus Hayes. This is my mother. Where is she? I'm right here, I said, stepping into the hallway. I don't know where I found the courage, but suddenly I felt tired of hiding. Marcus looked at me surprised. Then his expression changed to one that pretended to be relief. Mom, thank God. I've been looking for you everywhere. Have you really? I said. My voice sounded firmer. Then I felt. Or were you just looking for this? I held up the land deed. His face turned pale. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his
voice
barely trembled. We're talking about the forged signature you used to put my land up as collateral for your debts, the sergeant said. We're talking about fraud, and we're also talking about the gas incident at this rooming house. Marcus looked at me with a mixture of rage and fear. Mom, what have you been telling this man? What lies have you invented? They're not lies, I said. And you know it. For a moment, I thought he was going to deny everything, that he would keep acting like the worried son. But something in his face broke. I saw the truth, the silent admission. I had debts, he finally said in a low voice. I needed the money and you weren't using that land for anything. Then you asked me to sell it to you. You didn't try to kill me for it. I didn't try to kill you, he said, but without conviction. The gas, Marcus. Someone opened the heater valve the night I didn't sleep here.
Who was it?
He didn't answer. He just looked at me with eyes no longer recognized. This wasn't my son. Or perhaps he had always been this way, and I had been too blind to see it. Marcus Hayes, the sergeant said, you are under arrest for bank fraud and document forgery. You have the right to remain silent. As the sergeant read him his rights and put on the handcuffs, Marcus didn't stop looking at me.
And in
that look, I saw everything we had lost, everything we could never get back.
I
watched them take Marcus away in the patrol car, his hands cuffed behind his back, his head down, shame or anger painted on his face. I couldn't distinguish which of the two. The landlord watched me from the doorway, wide-eyed, not knowing what to say.
Sergeant O'Neill
stayed with me a few more minutes. I need you to come to the precinct tomorrow to make a full statement.
Bring
all the documents you have. We're going to need every detail. I nodded, unable to speak. I was still processing what had just happened. My son had been arrested because of me or because of himself. I didn't even know how to think about it anymore. That night, I didn't go back to the shelter. I couldn't face all those women with their own tragedies. I stayed in my rooming house room, sitting on the bed, staring at the wall. I didn't eat.
I didn't cry.
I just stayed there feeling an enormous emptiness in my chest.
When
Dawn broke, I got up like an automaton. I bathed, got dressed, and went straight to look for Ruth on her corner. I needed to tell her what had happened. I needed someone to tell me I had done the right
thing.
But when I got to her spot, I found something unexpected. She was there, but she wasn't alone. There was a young man with her, kneeling at her side, talking to her softly. He had a backpack and a camera hanging around his neck. I approached slowly. Ruth saw me and smiled tiredly. "Evelyn," she said, "come here. I want you to meet someone." The young man stood up and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you. My name is Jalen. I'm a journalist."
I
Shook his hand with suspicion. "A journalist?" "I'm doing a report on the homeless in the city," Ruth explained. "He's been telling me his story and yours, too."
I
Looked at Ruth, finally knowing her name.
Ruth, you told him about me. She
Nodded. "I told him everything about your son, about the gas, about how you helped me every day without knowing me."
I don't understand, I said. Why?
Jalen took out a notebook. "Because stories like yours need to be told.
People think that
People on the street are invisible, that they don't see anything, that they don't matter." But Ruth saw what was happening, and her testimony can be crucial to your case. The officer said her testimony didn't carry weight because she doesn't have a fixed address, I said bitterly. "That's why I'm here," Jalen said.
if I
"Can document her story, if I can show that Ruth is a real person with a clear mind who witnessed a crime, her testimony gains value. Plus, media exposure might pressure the authorities to take the case more seriously." I didn't know what to think.
part of me
Wanted to keep all this private, away from the public eye, but another part of me knew Jalen was right. Marcus had resources, contacts. I only had the
truth.
"What do you need from me?" I asked. "Your story in your own words, and your permission to publish it." We spent the next hour sitting on a nearby park bench. I told him everything from the beginning. How Marcus had kicked me out of the house, how I had gotten the job, how I had met Ruth, the warning, the
Gas, the arrest.
Jalen took notes quickly, stopping occasionally to ask specific questions. Ruth sat beside me, nodding when I mentioned moments when she had been present. "And the proof of the fraud?" Jalen asked. "Did you present it?" "I'm going to the precinct today.
The
Sergeant has the documents. I can go with you. I'd like to document that process." I hesitated, but finally nodded. If this was going to go public anyway, it might as well be with the whole truth. The three of us went to the precinct together. Sergeant O'Neill was surprised to see the journalist, but he didn't kick him out. Instead, he took me to an interrogation room and asked me to tell everything again, this time recording it officially. I spoke for almost 2 hours. The sergeant interrupted me occasionally to clarify details, to ask me to be more specific about some things.
when I
Finished, I felt exhausted. "We're going to process all this," the sergeant said. "Your son is being processed for bank
fraud.
That's solid. The attempted murder is more complicated to prove, but with Ruth's testimony and the gas evidence, we have a foundation." "How long will he be detained?" I asked.
It
"Depends on whether he posts bail. For bank fraud, bail could be around $30,000. If he can't pay it, he stays until trial." $30,000. Marcus didn't have that kind of money. That's why he had tried to steal the land in the first place. We left the precinct, and Jalen walked me back to the diner. It was time for my shift, and I couldn't miss work again. "I'm going to write the article this week," he told me before leaving. "I'll send you a copy before publishing it so you can approve everything. Sound good?" "Yes," I said. "Thank you." Mr. Johnson was waiting for me in the kitchen with a concerned expression. There were more customers than usual, and he needed urgent help.
I
Put on my apron and submerged myself in the work, grateful for the distraction. But mid-afternoon, everything changed. A woman came in whom I recognized immediately. It was Marcus's wife. She looked distraught, her makeup running, her eyes red from crying. She saw me behind the counter and came straight toward me. "You," she said in a trembling voice. "How could you do this? To your own son?" Everyone in the diner fell silent. Mr. Johnson came out of the kitchen when he heard the commotion. "I didn't do anything to him," I said calmly, although I was shaking inside.
He did it to himself.
"You put him in jail for a stupid piece of property that wasn't even worth anything. He forged my signature," I said. "He tried to steal the only thing I had left from my husband, and when that didn't work, he tried to kill me." She shook her head violently. "That's a lie. Marcus would never do anything like that. You're inventing everything because you're resentful that he asked you to leave his house."
His house.
I repeated. "That house I helped pay for? That house where I raised that son who now wants me dead." "Ma'am," Mr. Johnson intervened firmly. "I need you to leave. You are harassing my employee." "Employee?" She looked at me with contempt. "Look what you've become. A cook in a dive diner, and all because of your pride." "You're right," I said. "If I had let myself be robbed in silence, if I had agreed to die when the gas was opened in my room, none of this would have happened. But I'm alive and I'm going to fight." She gave me one last look of pure
Hatred.
"This isn't over. Marcus has lawyers. He's getting out, and when he gets out, you're going to regret this." "Is that a threat?" Mr. Johnson asked, pulling out his phone. "Because I can call the police right now." The woman gave me one last furious look before storming out of the diner. The silence hung heavy in the air. The customers slowly returned to their conversations. I stood behind the counter, my legs barely holding me up. Mr. Johnson put a hand on my shoulder. "Take the rest of the day off." "No," I said, "I need to work. I need to stay busy." He nodded, understanding, and went back to the kitchen. I kept working, but my hands trembled every time I had to carry a plate. That night, when I returned to the rooming house, I found an envelope slipped under my door. I picked it up, my heart racing. Inside was a handwritten note in crude letters. "Drop the charges or you'll regret it. This is your final warning." It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. I knew where it came from. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the bed with the light on, staring at the door, expecting someone to try to come in. I had put a chair under the doorknob, but I knew that wouldn't stop anyone if they really wanted in. At dawn, I went straight back to the precinct. I showed the note to
Sergio O'Neill.
He read it, his brow furrowed. "This is witness intimidation. I'm going to add this to the file." "Can't you do something more?" I asked.
Can't.
"You protect me? I can put more frequent patrols near your rooming house, and I recommend you don't go out alone at
night."
"Do you have any safer place to stay?" I thought of the shelter. I thought of asking Mr. Johnson for help. But finally, I shook my head. I didn't want to keep running. "I'm going to be fine, I
Leet.
But that afternoon, when Ruth saw me arrive at her corner, she immediately knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked. I showed her the note. She read it in silence and then looked at me with determination. "You have to let Jalen publish the article. Don't wait any longer. The more people know what's happening, the safer you'll be." "You think so?" "I know how these things work. Criminals act in the shadows. But when the lights are on them, they hide. If your story comes out in the newspaper, if people know who you are and what they're doing to you, they'll think twice before touching you." It made sense. I called Jalen from Ruth's phone. He answered on the second ring. "Publish the article," I told him, without preamble, "as soon as possible." "Are you sure?" "I haven't even sent you the final version for approval yet." "I'm sure. Just make sure you tell the truth." "I always do," he said. "It will be in the morning edition tomorrow and the digital version tonight." I hung up and handed the phone back to Ruth. She squeezed my hand.
You did the right thing, she said.
Now let the truth do its job. The article was published at 6 o'clock in the morning. Jalen sent me the link via text message. I read it sitting on the edge of my bed, my hands shaking as I held the phone. The headline read, "Elderly mother claimed son tried to murder her for inheritance. Homeless woman saved her." There were photos, one of Ruth on her corner, one of the rooming house where I lived, and one of me taken the day we went to the
Precinct.
I looked older than I remembered, more tired, but there was something in my eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. Determination. The article told everything. My expulsion from home, the job at the diner, how I had helped Ruth, the warning that saved my life, the gas, the document forgery, Marcus's arrest. Jalen had done a good job. He didn't exaggerate anything. He didn't paint me as a martyr or Marcus as a monster. He just told the facts, letting the story speak for itself. At the end of the article was a quote from me that I didn't even remember saying. "I don't want vengeance. I just want justice, and I want other mothers to know they are not alone if their own children betray them." I closed the phone and sat in silence. Now the whole world knew my story. There was no going back. When I arrived at the diner, Mr. Johnson had already read the article. He looked at me with a mixture of compassion and respect. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know things had gotten so bad." "No one knew," I replied. Not even I wanted to admit it. Throughout the morning, customers at the diner looked at me differently. Some with pity, others with curiosity, a few with admiration. An elderly woman approached me at the end of her meal. "I read your story," she said in a low voice. "My son did something similar to me. I never had the courage to report him, but you did. Thank you for that." She left before I could respond, leaving me with a lump in my throat. Mid-afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered with caution. "Miss Hayes, I'm Attorney Lisa Green. I'm a lawyer. I read your story in the paper, and I'd like to offer my services pro bono." I was speechless. "Why would you do that?" "Because cases like yours need visibility. Because family abuse of elderly parents is more common than people think, and because no one should have to face this alone." I agreed to meet with her that same afternoon. Her office was in a modest building downtown. She was a woman in her 40s with her hair pulled back in a bun and an intelligent gaze. "We'll go over everything from the beginning," she said, opening a new folder. "I need every detail, every document, every piece of evidence you have." We spent 2 hours reviewing my case. She took meticulous notes, stopping occasionally to ask specific questions. "The bank fraud is solid," she finally said. "We have the forged
Signature.
We have your testimony. We have the original documents. That's a sure thing. The attempted murder is more complicated, but not impossible. Ruth's testimony is crucial. And the fact that the gas was opened specifically in your room the night you weren't there is highly suspicious. What happens now? Now, we wait for the legal process. Your son has the right to a lawyer and to defend himself. There will be a preliminary hearing in a few days to determine if there is enough evidence to go to trial. I will be there, representing you." I left her office feeling a little stronger. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was on my side, that I wasn't completely alone in this. When I passed Ruth's corner, I found her surrounded by
People.
I approached concerned, but then I saw that it wasn't anything bad. They were people who had read the article and wanted to help her. Someone had brought her food, another a new blanket. A woman was offering her a spot in a decent shelter. Ruth saw me and smiled. "Look what your story has done." "Our story?" I corrected. That night, as I ate a piece of bread in my room, I received another call. This time it was Sergeant O'Neill. "Miss Hayes, I need to inform you that your son posted bail this morning."
My
heart skipped a beat.
How?
I thought he didn't have any money. Apparently his wife borrowed from some relatives. He was released under strict conditions. He can't approach you. He can't leave the city, and he has to check in at the precinct every week. But he's free for now. Yes, until trial. I hung up, my hands trembling. Marcus was free out there somewhere in the city. And although I had a restraining order, that was just a piece of paper. If he really wanted to hurt me, a piece of paper wouldn't stop him. I couldn't sleep that night. Every noise startled me. Every shadow that passed my window made me hold my breath. I put the chair under the doorknob again and left the light on. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hall. They stopped in front of my door. My heart pounded so loudly I thought whoever was outside could hear it. I waited. The seconds felt like hours. Then I heard the sound of something sliding under the door. I waited several minutes before daring to move. When I finally went to check, I found another envelope. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a photo. It was of me leaving the diner. Someone had been following me. Someone had been taking my picture. And on the photo, an X was drawn over my face in red marker. There was no message. None was needed. The threat was clear. At dawn, I went back to the precinct.
Sergio O'Neill.
Saw the photo and his expression hardened. This is a violation of the restraining order. I'm going to send an officer to arrest him again. What if it wasn't him? What if it was someone else? Who else would want to threaten you? I thought of Marcus's wife, her furious words at the diner, her look of hatred. His wife came to the diner a few days ago. She threatened me. The sergeant noted that we'll investigate both of them. In the meantime, I recommend you find a safer
Place to stay.
Do you have any family, any friends? I shook my head. I had no one, only Ruth, who lived on the street, and Mr. Johnson, who had already done enough for me. The shelter then, I said with resignation. But when I got to the shelter that afternoon, they told me there were no beds available. It was full. I could try again the next day, but they couldn't guarantee anything. I stood in the street with my bag in my hand, not knowing what to do. The sun was beginning to set. It would be night soon, and I had nowhere to sleep. That's when I saw Mr. Johnson approaching. He had come looking for me. Ruth called me. He said, "She told me what happened, and I came to offer you something. I have a small room above the diner. I use it for storage, but we can clean it out. It's not much, but it has a bed and a lock on the door. You'd be safer there than in the rooming house." Tears burned my eyes. I can't accept. You've already done so much for me. I'm not asking for your permission, he said firmly.
I'm
telling you the room is available. If you want to use it, use it. If not, it's your decision. But I'm not going to let one of my employees sleep on the street when I have space available. I accepted. Not because I wanted to take advantage of his kindness, but because I had no other choice, and because deep down I needed to feel safe, even if it was just for one night. The room above the diner was small, as he had said. It had a twin bed, an old wardrobe, and a window that overlooked an alley. But the door had a strong deadbolt, and the walls were thick. Here, at least, I could hear if anyone tried to enter. Mr. Johnson helped me carry my few belongings up. The bathroom is downstairs in the diner. You can use it whenever you want, and there's food in the kitchen. Don't go hungry.
Thank you.
That was all I could
say.
Words weren't enough to express what I felt. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because the bed was comfortable or because the place was pretty, but because for the first time in a long time I felt safe. The next morning, unexpected news arrived. Sergeant O'Neill had arrested Marcus's
wife.
They had found her near the rooming house the night before with a camera in her hand. She had been the one following me. She had taken the photo. She says she just wanted to scare you. The sergeant explained to me over the phone that she wasn't going to really hurt you, but that doesn't matter. Witness intimidation is a serious offense. She'll be detained for a few days while we process the charges.
I
hung up, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. Marcus's wife wasn't a bad person.
She
was just desperate trying to save her husband. But her actions had crossed a line. The preliminary trial was scheduled for the following week. Attorney Green prepared me for days, having me review my testimony again and again, anticipating the questions Marcus' lawyer might ask. They're going to try to paint you as a resentful mother, she warned. They're going to say you invented everything because you were angry that he asked you to leave his house. You have to stay calm. You have to stick to the facts. I practiced my testimony until the words felt mechanical, but I knew it was necessary. The trial wouldn't be one with emotions. It would be one with evidence. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived like a storm that you see coming, but that still hits you hard. I woke up early before dawn and sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the clothes I had prepared the night before. A simple gray dress, worn but clean shoes. It was the best I had. Attorney Green picked me up at the diner at 7 in the morning. She carried a leather briefcase and a serious expression. Ready? She asked. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. The courthouse was an old building with dark hallways and the smell of old paper. There were people waiting on benches outside the rooms, entire families, lawyers in expensive suits talking in low voices. Everything seemed intimidating and alien. We entered the courtroom. It was smaller than I had imagined. There were wooden benches, a stand where the judge would sit, and two tables facing each other for the lawyers. At one of them, I saw Marcus sitting next to his lawyer. He was wearing a suit I didn't recognize. He must have bought it especially for this, or maybe he had kept it stored away all this time. He didn't look at me when I entered. He kept his gaze forward, as if I didn't exist. I sat behind Attorney Green's table. Ruth was sitting in the public benches. She greeted me with a discreet gesture. Jalin, the journalist, was also there with his notebook, and Mr. Johnson, who had closed the diner for the morning to support me. The judge entered, and we all stood. He was an older man, about 60 years old, with completely white hair and thick glasses. He sat down and began reviewing the documents in front of him. Very well, he finally said, "We are here for the preliminary hearing in the case of Evelyn Hayes versus Marcus Hayes. The charges are bank fraud, document forgery, and attempted murder. Is the prosecution ready to present its arguments?" Attorney Green stood up. "Yes, Your Honor." Over the next hour, she presented all the evidence. The forge signature on the bank documents, Marcus' bank statements showing his debts, the technician's report on the gas leak. In my room, the landlady's testimony. Everything was there, organized and clear. Then it was my turn to testify. I went up to the stand, my legs trembling. I swore to tell the truth with my hand on a worn Bible and began to tell my story. I talked about how Marcus had asked me to leave his house, how I had found work at the diner, about my conversations with Ruth, about the night she warned me not to go back to the rooming house, about the gas. Marcus' lawyer interrupted me several times with objections. "That's speculation, Your Honor. The witness is assuming intentions she cannot prove." Attorney Green responded to each objection with professional calmness. When my testimony was finished, it was the turn of Marcus's lawyer to cross-examine me. He was a young man in his 30s with an immaculate suit and a practiced smile. "Miss Hayes," he began in a soft tone, "is it true that you and your son had a disagreement about the management of your finances?" "No, irraplia." He never consulted me about my finances, but you were aware that he had financial problems. I found out later when he forged my signature. Is it possible that you misinterpreted the situation? That your son needed help, and you in your vulnerable situation felt attacked? I didn't misinterpret anything, I said firmly. My son forged my signature to use my property as collateral for his debts, and when that wasn't enough, he tried to kill me with a gas leak. That is a very serious accusation. Do you have any direct proof that your son opened the gas valve? Ruth's testimony. She saw him prowling around my rooming house that night. The lawyer smiled. "Ah, yes, Ruth. A woman with no fixed address, no verifiable identification, no background we can check. Do you truly expect this court to accept the testimony of someone whose identity we can't even confirm? Ruth saved my life, I said, and her testimony is as valid as anyone else's. Your Honor, Attorney Green intervened. A witness's credibility is not determined by their housing situation. The judge nodded. Proceed, counselor. The interrogation continued for another half hour. Marcus' lawyer tried to discredit every part of my story. He implied I was inventing things out of spite, that I was confused due to my age, that I had misinterpreted my son's intentions. But I stayed calm. I answered every question truthfully. I didn't let myself be intimidated. When my testimony finally ended, I returned to my seat, trembling. Attorney Green squeezed my hand. You did well, she whispered. Then it was Ruth's turn. She went up to the stand in her donated clothes, clean but worn. She swore to tell the truth and began to testify. She spoke about how she had met me, about the times I gave her food and money, about the night she saw Marcus prowling my rooming house with a bag in his hand. Her voice was clear, and her memory was precise. Marcus's lawyer tried to discredit her, too. How can you be sure? It was my client? Do you have a photo? I don't need a photo, Ruth replied with dignity. I have eyes, and I saw that man sitting there lurking where he shouldn't have been. When the testimonies were finished, the judge called a recess. We went out into the hallway to wait. Attorney Green seemed optimistic. The fraud is solid, she told me. That's going to trial for sure. The attempted murder is more difficult to prove, but we presented a strong case. Half an hour later, we went back in. The judge had his decision ready. After reviewing the evidence presented, he said, I find there is probable cause to proceed with the charges of bank fraud and document forgery. Regarding the charge of attempted murder, although the evidence is circumstantial, there are sufficient suspicious elements to warrant a deeper investigation. The case will proceed to a full trial. I felt like I could breathe again. Marcus would still face the charges. Justice would continue its course. The months that followed were the strangest of my life. As we waited for the full trial date, my routine became a bizarre mix of normally and constant tension. I worked at the diner during the day. I slept in a room above the kitchen at night. And every week I met with Attorney Green to prepare my final testimony. But something had changed in me. I was no longer just the woman who had been kicked out of her house. I was no longer just the victim. I was becoming someone different, someone stronger. Jalen's article had an impact none of us expected. Other women began to contact me. Women who had gone through similar situations, daughters who had abandoned their mothers, sons who had stolen their pensions, families that had disintegrated due to greed. One afternoon, as I was wiping down the diner tables, an elderly woman walked in. She looked about 70, with hair dyed a mahogany shade and hands full of rings. She sat at a corner table and waited for me to approach. Evelyn Hayes? She asked when I arrived. With the menu? Yes, I replied cautiously. I read your story. My name is Brenda Cole, and I came to offer you something. She introduced herself as the director of an organization that helps seniors in situations of family abuse. We want you to give talks, she explained. Tell your story. Help other women recognize the signs of abuse before it's too late. The idea overwhelmed me. I'm not good at public speaking. You don't need to be good, Brenda said softly. You just need to be honest. Your story has power. You can save lives. I agreed to think about it. And the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. If my suffering could be used to help others, then it hadn't been in vain. My first talk was at a small community center. There were about 20 women sitting in folding chairs, all over 60, all with stories written on their tired faces. My hands were shaking when I stood in front of them. My name is Evelyn Hayes, I began. And my son tried to kill me over a piece of land worth $3,000. The silence in the room was absolute. And then I started talking. I told them everything. I didn't omit anything. The pain, the shame, the fear, but I also told them about the hope, about Ruth, about the people who had helped me when I needed it most. When I finished, several women had tears in their eyes. One of them raised her hand. "My daughter does the same thing," she said in a broken voice. "She constantly asks me for money. She threatens me if I don't give it to her. I thought it was my fault that I had done something wrong." "It's not your fault," I told her. "And you're not alone." After that talk, more came. I spoke in churches, in senior day centers, in support groups. Each time it was easier. Each time I felt like my story was serving a purpose greater than myself. Meanwhile, Ruth was changing, too. The exposure from the article had brought her unexpected help. A non-profit organization had found her a spot in a permanent shelter. She no longer slept on the street. She had a bed, a roof, 3 meals a day. But the most important thing was the bond we had created. We saw each other almost every day. Sometimes she came to the diner and Mr. Johnson gave her free food. Other times I went to the shelter to visit her. We talked about everything and nothing. She told me stories of her life before she was homeless. I told her my fears about the approaching trial. You know what the strangest thing about all this is? I told her one afternoon while we were having coffee at the shelter. My son kicked me out of his life, but I found a new family. You, Mr. Johnson, Attorney Green, even Jalen. They've all become the family I never thought I'd have. Ruth smiled. Sometimes God closes doors so we can find windows, or in our case, so we can find street corners. We laughed together. It was the first time in months I had truly laughed. The trial was scheduled for early December. 2 weeks before, Attorney Green called me with news. Marcus' lawyer wants to make a deal. She told me he's offering for Marcus to plead guilty to the bank fraud in exchange for you dropping the attempted murder charge. What does that mean? It means he would go to prison for the fraud, likely between 3 and 5 years. But he wouldn't face charges for trying to kill you. It's a shorter sentence. And what do you think? There was a pause. I think the attempted murder charge is difficult to prove. We have strong circumstantial evidence, but we don't have a confession or a direct witness who saw him open the gas valve. A jury could have doubts. Accepting the deal guarantees he goes to prison. Rejecting it is a risk. How much time do I have to decide? Until tomorrow. I spent that night awake. I paced back and forth in my small room thinking about all the options. Part of me wanted to reject the deal. I wanted Marcus to face all the charges. I wanted him to pay for trying to kill me. But another part of me was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of reliving the pain over and over. 3 years in prison was enough for him to understand the consequences of his actions. 5 years, even more so. The next morning I called Attorney Green. I accept the deal, I told her. But with one condition. I want him to renounce all rights to the land, to sign legal documents ceding any future claim on my property, and I want a permanent restraining order. I don't want him to ever come near me again, even when he gets out of prison. I can arrange that, she said. Leave it to me. The deal was finalized 3 days later. Marcus pleaded guilty to bank fraud and document forgery. He signed the papers, renouncing any rights to my property. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in prison with no possibility of parole, until he served at least 2 years. I didn't go to the sentencing hearing. I didn't want to see his face when he heard the verdict. Attorney Green went on my behalf and called me afterward with the news. It's over, she told me. You can move forward with your life now. But moving forward wasn't as simple as it sounded. The months that followed were about adjustment, healing, learning to live without the constant weight of fear. Mr. Johnson offered me a permanent job at the diner with a decent salary. You're no longer just temporary help, he said. You're part of this place, and I want you to stay.
I
Accepted with gratitude. The diner had become my refuge, my home. I also began to rebuild my financial life. With Attorney Green's help, I managed to sell the land my husband had left me.
It
Wasn't worth much, as Marcus had said, only $3,000, but it was enough to start.
over.
I used part of the money to rent a small apartment, just one room, a tiny kitchen and a bathroom, but it was mine. No one could kick me out of there. No one could tell me there was no room for me. With another part of the money, I helped Ruth. I bought her new clothes, shoes, a thick coat for the winter. I paid for the dental treatment she urgently needed. It wasn't charity.
It
Was gratitude. She had saved my life. The least I could do was help her improve hers. You didn't have to do this, she said when I handed her the bags of new things. Yes, I did, I replied. You gave me a second chance. Let me return the favor. The talks I gave at community centers began to multiply. Brenda Cole, the organization director, had officially brought me on as a volunteer. Now I traveled around the city, giving lectures on family abuse toward seniors. Every time I told my story, I saw faces, recognizing themselves in it. Women who nodded with tears in their eyes, men who admitted to having gone through similar situations, and always at the end, someone would approach to thank me. Your story gave me the courage to report my son, a woman told me after one talk. Thanks to you, my mother finally accepted that what was happening to her wasn't normal. Another told me. Each thank you was a reminder that my suffering hadn't been useless, that something good had come out of all that.
pain.
A year after Marcus's arrest, Jalen published a follow-up article. 1 year later, how Evelyn Hayes rebuilt her life after family betrayal.
The
Article talked about my work at the diner, my talks, my friendship with Ruth, about how I had turned my tragedy into a mission. The response was overwhelming. I received letters from all over the country. Some were from women thanking me for giving them a voice. Others were from remorseful children who had read my story and realized the harm they were causing their own parents. One letter in particular made me cry. It was from a young woman who had been considering kicking her mother out of her house due to lack of space. After reading my story, she had decided to look for another solution. I don't want to be like Evelyn's son, she wrote. I don't want my mother to end up like that. Thank you for opening my eyes. I keep that letter in a drawer alongside others I received during the difficult days. When the memory of the pain is too strong, I pull them out and reread them. They remind me why I decided to go public with my story, why I decided to keep fighting. 2 years have passed since Marcus went to prison. 2 years in which my life has changed in ways I never imagined possible. I wake up every morning in my small apartment, brew coffee in my tiny kitchen, and look out the window at the city that almost destroyed me, but ultimately gave me a second chance. Mr. Johnson's Diner is still my daily refuge. I'm now the head cook. He says my food has a special flavor that people come specifically for my stews. I don't know if it's true or just his way of making me feel valuable, but I like to believe him. Mr. Johnson has become more than a boss. He's the brother I never had, the friend who showed up when I needed him most. Sometimes on quiet afternoons, we sit in the kitchen drinking coffee, and he tells me stories of his youth. I tell him mine, and we laugh about how life has strange ways of putting the right people in your path just when you're about to give up. Ruth still lives at the shelter, but she no longer spends her days sitting on a corner. She now volunteers at a community kitchen.
She
Helps serve food to other homeless people. She says it's her way of giving back what others gave her when she needed it most. We see each other at least 3 times a week. Sometimes I go to visit her at the shelter. Other times, she comes to the diner, and we eat dinner together after I close. We talk about everything. Our past lives, our fears, our dreams for the future. She is the sister I chose, the family I built with my own hands. Did you know that today, Marks exactly 2 years since I gave you that warning? She told me a few days ago, while we shared a plate of chicken and rice in the empty diner. I hadn't known, but thinking about it, I realized how much I had changed since that night. The woman who agreed not to return to her rooming house based on a stranger's advice no longer exists. In her place is someone stronger, someone who knows that kindness is not weakness and that asking for help is not a shame.
My talks at
Community centers have expanded. I now travel to other cities. Brenda Cole's organization pays me a small stipend for each conference. It's not much, but added to my salary from the diner, it's enough to live with dignity. Every time I get on a stage and see those tired faces looking at me with hope, I remember why I do this. It's not just
for me.
it's for all the women who are going through what I went through. For all the mothers who feel invisible, disposable, worthless. You are not a burden. I always tell them, you are. Human beings with dignity, with rights, with stories that deserve to be told. And if someone, even if it's your own, family makes you feel less than that, then that person is wrong, not you. After each talk, lines of women form, wanting to speak to me. Some just want to give me a hug. Others need advice on how to report their abusive family members. Some simply need someone to listen to them. I stay with each one for as long as they need, because I know what it feels like to be alone. I know what it feels like for no one to listen to.
You.
And if I can give them even 10 minutes of attention, of validation, of company, I do it. I have received 2 letters from Marcus since he's been in prison. The first came a year ago.
It
Was short, cold, full of justifications. It wasn't my intention to hurt you, it
said.
I was just desperate. I hope you can forgive me someday. I didn't reply to it. The second letter arrived 3 months ago. It was different, more honest, more broken. It talked about how he had had time to think in prison, about how he finally understood the magnitude of what he had done, about how he lived with the guilt every day.
I
Don't expect your forgiveness, he wrote at the end. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. I truly am. I keep that letter in the same drawer, where I keep the others, the ones from the women who thank me for my story, the ones from the remorseful children. Altogether, reminding me that life is complex, that people can be good and bad. At the same time, that forgiveness is not always possible, but understanding is. I don't know if I can ever forgive Marcus. Honestly, I don't know if I want to. What he did almost cost me my life. It cost me my home, my security, my faith in family. Those are wounds that don't heal easily, but I've learned that I don't need to forgive him to move forward, that I can carry the pain and still build a beautiful life, that I can remember what happened without letting it define me. Attorney Green has become a close friend. We have lunch together once a month. She tells me about her other cases. I tell her about my conferences. Sometimes she asks me for advice on how to approach older clients who have gone through situations similar to mine. You have a gift for this, she told me the last time we saw each other. For connecting with people, for making them feel seen. Maybe she's right. Or maybe it's just that I've been in their shoes. I felt what they feel. And that genuine empathy is something that can't be faked. The apartment I rented has become my sanctuary. It's small, yes, the walls are thin, and sometimes I hear the neighbors arguing, but it is mine. No one can kick me out. No one can tell me there's no room for me here. I've decorated the walls with photos, one of Ruth and me the day I helped her move into the shelter. Another of Mr. Johnson and me in front of the diner. One more of my first conference with all those women applauding after I finished speaking. I don't have photos of Marcus. I don't have photos of my old life. That life ended, and although it hurts to admit it, it was the best thing that could have happened because it forced me to rebuild myself. It forced me to discover who I was beyond being a mother, beyond being a wife, beyond all the roles others had assigned me. I discovered that I am strong, that I am capable, that I can survive even when everything crumbles around me. A few Weeks ago, Brenda Cole offered me a formal job at the organization. We need someone like you, she told me,
Someone.
who has lived through this, someone who can lead our support program for victims of family abuse. I told her I would.
Think about it.
It's an incredible opportunity, but it also means leaving the diner, leaving the place that gave me refuge when I needed it most. I talked to Mr. Johnson about it.
I
Expected him to be upset, to tell me I was abandoning him, but instead he smiled. Evelyn, he said, I gave you work because you needed it, but I always knew you were destined for something bigger. If this opportunity makes you happy, take it. You'll always have a place here, if you decide to come back. His words made me cry because they confirmed something I had started to understand. That good people exist, that kindness is not a weakness, that helping others, without expecting anything in return, is what makes us human. I accepted the job. Did I start next month? I'm going to lead a team of social workers and volunteers who help seniors in situations of abuse. I'm going to design programs. I'm going to give training sessions. I'm going to continue giving conferences.
but now as
An official part of my job, it's terrifying and exciting at the same time. Yesterday, walking back to my apartment after work, I passed the corner where Ruth used to sit. No one is there anymore.
but I stopped anyway. I
Stood in that spot remembering. I remembered the first time I gave her some coins. I remembered all the times we looked at each other in silence. Two women, invisible to the world, but visible to each other. I remembered the night she grabbed my hand and told me not to go back to my rooming house. That warning saved my life. But more than that, it changed the course of my existence. It led me down a path I never would have chosen, but one I wouldn't trade for anything now. Because yes, I lost my son. I lost my home. I lost the life I knew. But I gained something much more valuable. I gained my dignity.
I
Gained my voice. I gained the certainty that I am stronger than I ever imagined. And I gained a new family. Not of blood, but of choice. Ruth, Mr. Johnson, Lisa, Brenda, Jalen, all the women I've met at my conferences, everyone who helped me when I was at my lowest point. This morning, as I was having coffee in my apartment, I received a message from Ruth. Breakfast together today. I have something to tell you. I replied, yes, immediately, because that's what family does. It shows up. It's there in the good times and the bad. I put on my coat, the one I bought with the money from the land sale, and walked toward the community kitchen where we had agreed to meet. The sun was shining. It was cold, but not unpleasant. The city was waking up around me, full of life, full of possibilities. And as I walked, I thought about everything that had happened, how far I had come, the woman I had been, and the woman I had become. I am no longer the 69-year-old woman who was kicked out of her house. I am no longer just the victim of her son's betrayal. I am Evelyn Hayes. I am a survivor. I am a fighter. I am living. Proof that it is never too late to start over. And if my story can help even one person find the courage to get out of an abusive situation, then every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of fear will have been worth it. Because in the end, life is not about what happens to us. It is about what we do with what happens to us. And I chose not to remain a victim. I chose to get up.
I chose to fight.
I chose to turn my pain into purpose. And that more than anything else is my victory. I arrived at the kitchen and saw Ruth waiting for me at a table by the window. When she saw me enter, she smiled. That smile I had first seen 2 years ago on a street corner. That smile that had saved my life. I sat across from her and took her wrinkled hand in mine.
Thank you, I said.
Not for the first time.
Probably.
Not for the last time. For what? She asked, though we both knew the answer. For seeing me when no one else would. For helping me when you had no reason to. For reminding me that there's still goodness in this world. She squeezed my hand. You did the same for me. We saved each other. And she was right, because that's what people who find each other in the darkness do. They hold on,
They,
support each other, and together they find a way back to the light.
I'm.
Really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, two of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.